Thanks, Chris. You have to stay up here.
Oh,
Sorry. Not out yet. So we have time for questions and answers. If you have questions for the panelists from the video, please feel free to shout those out. Just let me know who you want to talk to. And, or if you have questions for Chris. Question? Yes. I'm going to come to you.
Yes, please. I actually have a question for you, Jamie, about how when your store shut down, what was your process for sort of re-envisioning what you wanted Shine to become? Because you...
Okay, Jamie, I have to stand up. I know. She was really hoping nobody would ask questions. Thank you for that. So the hard part of that was that I didn't, that my husband Drew, who's back there behind the camera, we did not want to work for anyone except ourselves. So we had no choice but to pivot and to think about what else can we do to work for ourselves. And so that had to be, we had to keep the brand in mind, keep the brand intact, but then shift our day-to-day operation and output, which was video. And so it was real evolution. It didn't happen overnight. And it was something that we have actually, I think we're working on Shine 8.0 right now. Before, you know, when I entered the picture of Shine Collective, it was Shine 2.0, and it's just been an evolution ever since. And we knew that retail sucks, so don't ever do it, anyone. Don't ever do it. And having inventory is not a good thing, especially during the recession. And then creating a new commodity and a new business with video was really what we had to do, and that was our objective. And so we just had to move forward. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Thanks, Jane. Oh, it's working. Yeah. Hey, Crystal.
Hi, my question is for Jamie and Camille. Sorry, it's a long question. I'm just curious, when you reached that point of failure, how did you allow your the public's perception of your failure to kind of shape your next step, or did you not allow it to shape your next step? Was that something you struggled with? Sorry.
Well, hey, girl. Thanks for the question. Yeah, so with my failure in particular, you know, I'm a yoga teacher, and you didn't hear it in the video, but the failure that I had, I was working at a gym that didn't serve me, didn't like it, I didn't like it, and the way I was like, it was a very public way of getting, like I was on Facebook, and I was embarrassed, and I had to say, you know what, like, failure happens, people get fired, they have to let go of what doesn't serve them. And it really took a sense of kind of letting my guard down and being vulnerable. You know, I think a lot of times we like to kind of put this wall up and not let people in during our times of failure, because failure is often associated with a negative connotation and negative experience. But I had to say, you know what, this is my truth, this is what happened to me, and it was during times like that where I had to say, you know what, here I am, let me just own it. So.
At the point of transition, I had a really good friend who's a business person, who's really smart, who had me look at it in a really objective, just all business way, and that was it was really important for me, because I was like, I can't take this personally. This is just business, and and necessary for our survival, and also in order to keep working for ourselves, we had to change, and so I couldn't take it personally. That was it. Thanks. I'm gonna come over to Kevin, and then I'll get you up.
My question is for Chris. So you said that you and your partner didn't want to become gallerists. You want a space that people can interact with. And my question is, in your mind, in your dreams, you create this space, people come in, and what happens?
Oh.
I
I think that's up to the participant. It's funny because part of our understanding of art is, I think when I was a kid and stuff, you go to an art museum and you couldn't touch the work or interact with the work. And I remember, is it Richard Serra's piece or Carl Andre, the zinc magnesium plane? And it's Sarah, right? Yeah. And when I remember being a kid and seeing that and being like, this is the best thing in the world. You know, like it was something that I could interact with within the space. But how you interact with it, he never really puts that out there. It's up to you to kind of do that. So the intention of it is to put this object out there as if you found it. Like when you're also in the woods and you find a treehouse, you know. And there's all these sort of things that are there for you to interact with. And then I think hopefully reflecting back about those experiences within your own life. And that's where a lot of it comes from with us, is it's a lot of joking and it's a lot of those experiences that we have that the work comes out of. So it's like, oh, I was thinking about this weird place that I was the other day. And then I'm like, I thought about this weird place I was the other day. And then 2 days later, we're like, what if we take those two places and like crush them together into one place? And then that pushes the similarities and differences between them, which I think there's a lot of that happening in any space you go into. So hopefully you take that with you and then you go to the next place and have that sort of same reaction.
Thanks. Ross?
My question's for I guess Chris and Aaron. In your experience and in utilizing your mastery over a material and your craft, how do you ensure that failure doesn't cause you to second guess your mastery of material and end up kind of sacrificing future work by way of kind of questioning your mastery?
I'll let Aaron do this one because I have no mastery of material.
Well, I think, and when I said I've had a lot of small failures along the way, the biggest things I can think of failure-wise were like things I've applied for and not gotten, whether it's a grant or a residency or a show or whatever. And every time that happens, I reevaluate what I'm doing, not like questioning, should I give up and go back to doing this or get not fall back on something else, but just like, well, what might they be seeing? And how can I develop in the future? And that was like something we talked about a lot with like, if you have a plan the whole time through, you're not going to grow, your stuff's going to stay the same, you're not going to get better, or you might be great and then people are just going to get tired of seeing the same thing, so yeah, I guess I haven't questioned should I give up, but where am I going to develop? There's always going to be people who don't like your taste. My stuff, and sometimes I think I haven't gotten into things, I paint portraits and sometimes it's seen as too accessible, and so I have thought, like, do I need to be more conceptual? But I've never changed that far. Like, I've stuck within what I want to be doing, but then developed that work. It's changed a lot since I started doing it. So yeah, you change and you grow from those kinds of experiences.
I can say that I've got to. Along those lines, there have been, setting out to fail with materials. I think there was a point with the camper when we were first doing it, where we were like trying to make the things look like they were failures along the way, and it just looks like we couldn't deal with it. It just didn't work right. So I think that's where we get into limiting ourselves with our materials and letting the materials kind of be. And you still need to, like our work, there's like varnish that's kind of put on incorrectly and paint that's not quite right, and there's drips and things like that. But if we were to attempt to do that, it doesn't end up working. So we are trying really hard to make this stuff look right. But it, letting when the screw splits the wood or whatever, it's that point of like being like, okay, well that's how it is now, instead of like taking the piece of wood out and then, and then we might fill the hole with hot glue or something to smooth it out.
You love hot glue.
Yeah.
Next one. Yeah.
My question is for all the panelists. I'd like your opinion on. It was actually my experience hearing Gavin's story. I found myself wanting a happy ending. Does failure have to have a lesson?
So one of the things that Katie did really brilliantly at the cocktail was give us a little slip of paper that said, if you could replace the word failure, what would you replace it with? And I'm paraphrasing, but it was really, and in sort of struggling to come up with something clever, I realized, I think we should keep failure. The point is to redefine it. And I think it really is rooted in that idea that I don't think it has to have a happy ending in and of itself, but failure is always just a snapshot in time. It's just a single point on a continuing line. Sort of when we say something has failed, it's because we've stopped measuring right there. So maybe, on that it isn't a happy ending, which may be just a sort of pseudo-Zen way of getting around to saying, like, it does always have a happy ending, but I don't think it has an ending, I guess. It's just, for me, it's not objectively an answer, but I guess my reflection on that would be, can we relearn to understand failure as that journey of exploration, I guess. It's such a binary that we get into of success and failure. I don't know what quote-unquote success you can get to in a creative field. I mean, this isn't about balancing your budget or something. That's reasonably objective, I guess. But what success we ever achieve that hasn't had wrong turns along the way, or else, I think, to really quote badly what everyone else was saying, you've just set your goals too low, I think. So that's my first response.
Anybody else? Anybody else from the panel want to address that?
Yeah, sure.
Well, your point that you mentioned, it reminded me of when we were at the cocktail. I said, you are not your failure, and you're not defined by your failure. And so Gavin kind of made the point, well, failure is about how you redefine it. And he kind of shared that, it's how you channel it, and failure could be a part of life, and it's never ending, and there is no ending. So when you brought that up, it kind of reminded me of that. So.
Yeah. We have time for a couple more. Yeah, come back here.
Hi. So there's a lot of panelists and artists in the room that work collaboratively, especially Chris and Gavin, who work in environments that are surrounded by other artists. And I think my question is how do you judge or come to conclusion of each other's failure? I mean, that's kind of a difficult thing to say, but you're working with another individual who you collaborate with directly, and Gavin, you work with a team of individuals who you collaborate directly with. And there comes a point where it's like, okay, we're done. We're moving on. What does this mean? And how do you communally grow from that experience? That's a pretty difficult thing for, maybe one person thinks it's a failure, other person thinks like, this is freaking awesome, So where's the feedback? And especially Gavin, because you work with so many people, and as a dramaturg, you're giving so much feedback all the time, There's a lot of opportunity for communal perceived failure and actual communal failure. Sorry, there was a lot there.
So glad I don't have to repeat the questions this month.
At least, I think being open about it, and that kind of goes back to that question about does there always have to be a lesson learned with a failure? And part of the creative process is, for us at least, is when we're done with a piece, we take some time off, and then we talk about it. And we openly kind of talk about what the successes and failures are. Another part of that is Sean and I will do our own research, and then kind of by ourselves, and then we bring it together so that one person's voice isn't more dominant than the others within a discussion. So if we get it all out on paper of what our expectations are for the next piece, and then we talk about that, that seems to be a good way to work. I think sometimes probably like we've wanted to kill one another, but there's always, it's like any business or relationship or anything like that, that there's always those points, and you have to cope with those situations and talk to other people sometimes and get their opinion, and then be open about it and be like, I don't know what this is. And we both said that to one another, like, I don't know what you were thinking here. This is terrible. And then usually it's like, yeah, thanks, and then we just kind of rip it out and go on to the next thing, I don't know what you're...
Well, I think unlike Aaron's work, Chris's work, Jamie, you and Drew, we're getting constant feedback, giving and taking constant feedback when you're working on a play, whether it's a developmental work on a script or whether you're going through previews. So there's a lot of other opinions and a lot of sort of measure that you get. So that's helpful, is you can kind of displace your judgment into that, I think, more than you have to be your own measures. You do what you mean, you put it up there and people deal with it, I think. So I guess the clarity of expectation is a huge piece for me, or owning that. I think if you're clear on the terms by which you're assessing as you're responding to a playwright, as you're responding to a piece, or if they're clear on what they set out to achieve or where they think they're going, you can say, well, it's headed there, or not, or I'm seeing that, or not seeing that, or well, I'm seeing these other things. Maybe that's actually more worthwhile where we're going to, something that kind of give and take. But I think a hard measure is sometimes, right? Let's say artistically, you can feel that you've had an enormous success, or you've achieved what you wanted, but the audience doesn't agree. Or it's a commercial thing, the ticket sales were not what they wanted to be. Is that a success or a failure? And that's a lot of the reason I think I come into the room wanting so strongly to redefine the idea of success, is that, thanks to publications, Variety or whatever else is out there, everything we read, how much a movie makes, everything is we're trying to quantify its success. It could be a crappy movie and make a lot of money. It could be a crappy play. And there are times when you're really unhappy with the art you've made, but the audience is lapping it up with spoons. I'm sure none of you all do that. But and so being comfortable with that disparity, I guess. But I think as long as I think bridging the gap is about having that clarity of expectation. And then what I admire and what I'm hearing from some of you all is the sort of, can I swear? So fuck them piece of it. I mean, I think that's, glib as that can sound, I think that's really important. Is sort of when you finally say, well, I don't, or even if your dramaturg comes in and you're a playwright and say, well, fuck it, this is, I believe in this. So the creative friction of that external, it's not judging, the sharing of a critical eye can be to get you to say, yes, yes, I do believe in that medium, or yes, I do believe in that innovation, or yes, I do. It sort of pushes you in there, I think. So, I don't know, setting out those boundaries. But just to recap, having the clarity of expectation on both sides seems valuable. I have a quick, can I use this to throw back a question? I wonder, sort of being here in the Walters, in an institution that celebrates the sort of great achievement of finished product, would either of you, or would you all, think of sharing or putting up with it the sort of missteps along the way, the journey taken? Would you put in unfinished pieces or mistakes along the way alongside your work? Would you share your failure?
Well, I was just going to say, I do that kind of all the time. I don't know if they're failures yet, but all the parts along the way. I use social media to do that. Kind of as I'm working on paintings, people get to see. And I've had people say, maybe they think I failed or something, so they're like, that doesn't even look like the person yet. And it'll say like, I just started, and just will be in caps. And then I'll get like, I've had this happen where there's like, I always say people who comment on social media in paragraph form are crazy. But like, so there's like, somebody goes on this whole long thing, like giving me this critique. And the only thing I said, I was like, oh, that's cool. Well, just started, and like, we'll see what happens, And then somebody else, like, I don't know why I'm going from the standard, but somebody else then stuck up for the piece, and then they went back and forth on this whole thing. But anyway, so I guess the one guy thought that I failed, but, I just started. But yeah, so yeah, I guess I do that personally. I show the work as it's in progress, as I'm going. And sometimes it doesn't look like the person at all at that point, or how I want it to be. And sometimes I start almost completely over. So I think it's good. And I mean, I don't really put it, I guess when I put it up there, I'm asking for feedback, but I don't always really care if I hear it or not.
Did you want to speak to that?
Yeah.
If you want.
In working with materials on the way, I had the dean that was at our graduate school. He was the one that was kind of like, he was the first person to say, when someone would come into class and they'd be like, I didn't do this because I didn't have this or whatever. He, one day in class, was like, well, all you really need is a pencil to communicate something two-dimensionally. And we were all kind of like, we're not going to get away with anything the rest of the 2 years we're here. And this one exhibition in particular, we were getting ready to label everything, and the printer broke. And we were all kind of sitting in the room scrambling, and someone was like, well, I guess we just need a pencil. So we went out and we just wrote all the titles of the artwork and the artist next to the work all through. And we're like, oh, this is so clever. Like, the dean's going to come in. He's going to love this. He came in, he looked at the exhibition, and he looks around, he comes up to us, he's like, what's with the pencil on the wall? And we're like, oh, I guess all we need is a pencil. He's like, yeah, well, it looks terrible. So at that point, we were kind of like, what? And he's like, it doesn't mean that it can just look awful. Like, you should have tried to do this a lot better. So there's that moment.
All right, we have time for one more.
This question is for any other panelists. Feel free to, whoever wants it, grab it. So after having failures and not only acknowledging them, but embracing them, how has that encouraged you or freed you from terms like endurance, tenacity, having a plan B, things like that, So how has that allowed you to dig even deeper into your personal work? So anybody?
Anybody want to?
I think if you have a plan B, you're kind of, that gets into that sabotage realm a bit. And that sometimes that's a good option, but when it comes to art and things, it's not, I don't think, as necessary. Unless you're like Richard Serra or something with something that's really heavy. But it's like one of those things that, if you plan that, then you're already knowing what the outcome is going to be. It's like having a prenup. Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
Yeah, I was gonna. All right. I think we're really familiar with the many stages of whatever it is we're trying to do, and I think what you're saying is Plan B, but there's actually Plan E, F, G. It's just we're just letting ourselves move into it and not necessarily have an end. Or I think the goal really is to sustain it and to keep ourselves fed and to make it better, just to make it better. And what we've learned is actually working with people and opening ourselves up and letting ourselves just create things and not worry about if they're perfect or if they're if they're going to be exactly what we think they're going to be. When we let go of that fear, we actually begin to make better work.
Seems like a really good place to end on. Yeah. Thanks again, guys. Have a great day.